Every night like clockwork, the dog scratched the floor in the baby's room. Same spot, same time, over and over again. At first, the family brushed it off, but when they finally decided to check what was under the floor, they couldn't believe what they found. Their blood ran cold. We've all seen dogs act a little strange sometimes, maybe barking at nothing, chasing shadows, or refusing to go into certain rooms. But what if that odd behavior wasn't random? What if your dog was trying to tell you something urgent? This is the story of how one family almost ignored the signs until it was almost too late, and what they uncovered will stay with them forever. The Johnson family had always considered their golden retriever, Max, just another member of the family, and not in a casual way. Max wasn't just a dog who lived in their house. He lived in their hearts. Loyal, playful, gentle, especially around their newborn daughter, Emma. He was the kind of dog you tell stories about years after they're gone. He had been there through it all. When Emily and Tom moved into their first house, it was Max who ran circles through the empty living room, sliding on the freshly polished wood floors like a kid at recess. When they brought Emma home from the hospital, it was Max who gently sniffed her toes, let out a sigh, and curled up beside her bassinet, as if he'd just taken on a new job guardian. Max was more than just a dog. He was a presence, a soul that filled quiet moments with comfort. When Emma cried in the middle of the night, Max would beat Emily to the nursery door, pacing anxiously until someone picked her up. He seemed attuned to her needs in a way that felt almost human. So when things started to change, it was hard to ignore. Emma was barely 6 months old when Max's behavior took a strange turn. It began subtly, almost too subtly to notice at first. Max would follow them into Emma's nursery at night, which wasn't unusual, but instead of lying beside the crib like he normally did, he would pace, quietly, back and forth, eyes locked on the floor. Then came the scratching. It started with just a few light scrapes, a paw against the wooden floorboards, almost like he was digging, but the more they ignored it, the more frequent it became. Within a week, it was every single night, and always in the same exact spot, near the far right corner of the nursery. Scratch paws, scratch whimper. He'd lower his head, ears pinned back, tail tucked slightly under, and stare. It was unsettling. At first, Emily brushed it off. Maybe there's a mouse or something under there, she suggested, standing with her arms folded as she watched Max dig with slow, deliberate motions. But Tom shook his head. This house is sealed tight, he said. No droppings, no chewed boxes. It's not rodents. Emily didn't answer right away. She wanted to believe he was right. She really did. But something about Max's behavior didn't feel like curiosity. It felt like urgency. Every night was the same. Emma asleep in her crib. Emily and Tom just about to relax on the couch, maybe watch a show or clean up after dinner. And Max, he'd be in that nursery, scratching, digging, crying. When they tried keeping him out, it only got worse. He'd sit outside the door and whine, soft at first, then louder, barking under his breath in a deep, anxious rhythm that made Emily's heart pound. She'd never seen him like that before, not even during thunderstorms or fireworks. It didn't take long before they stopped sleeping through the night. But the part that really started to worry Emily wasn't Max. It was Emma. Their daughter, once a sound sleeper, had started waking up more often. Some nights she'd wake up crying uncontrollably. Other nights, she wouldn't cry. She'd just lie in the crib, wide-eyed, staring at the same corner Max was fixated on. That corner, the same one he scratched at, the same one he watched. The room felt colder there. Emily swore she could feel a draft, even though they'd sealed every window tight for the winter. She'd catch herself glancing at that corner, standing frozen in the doorway, as if waiting for something to move. But it never did. Still, the air felt off. She brought it up to Tom again. I know this sounds stupid, she said one night, tucking Emma back into her crib after another restless wake-up. But doesn't it feel like something's there? Tom smiled but didn't laugh. That was the first sign that he, too, was starting to feel the weight of it. I don't know, he replied. Maybe it's just a phase. Dogs get weird sometimes. Yeah, Emily murmured, glancing over at Max, who sat stiff as stone, eyes locked on that spot. But babies don't. They decided to check the floorboards. Tom got down on his knees the next morning, running his hands over the wood. Nothing loose, no holes, no hollow sounds. He even brought out a flashlight and peeked through the cracks. Nothing. Max watched him the whole time, tail flat, eyes wide. Emily searched online. Dogs scratching the floor at night. Dog obsessed with nursery corner. Dogs detecting spirits. That last one brought her to a dark corner of the internet. Forums where people shared stories about pets reacting to things unseen. She clicked out of it fast, telling herself she didn't believe in that kind of stuff. Still, she didn't sleep well that night. It was around that time that Max's behavior escalated. He began whining during the day, staring at the nursery even when Emma wasn't in there. He would sit beside the crib when it was empty and just wait, as if he expected something or someone to appear. It was affecting everyone. Emily felt tense all the time. Her neck ached from poor sleep. Her eyes rimmed red from crying during the day, sometimes for no reason. Tom became withdrawn too, less joking, more silence. And Emma developed a strange habit of her own. When placed on her back in the crib, she would twist to her side, facing the corner, and smile. Sometimes she'd giggle, sometimes she'd babble to no one. It was adorable and chilling. "I think we should get someone to check under the floor," Emily said one morning, rubbing her eyes. "Maybe something's down there. Wiring, pipes." Tom hesitated, then nodded. That evening, Tom pulled back a section of the rug near the corner. He tapped and knocked. Nothing. Then, as he stood up, Max lunged forward and began pawing at the boards again, this time harder than ever before. Not just scratching, but clawing. Splinters flew. His nails scraped. He let out a low growl. Emma, watching from Emily's arms, began to cry. That was the moment they realized. It wasn't just a habit. It wasn't just a smell. Max knew something was under there, and whatever it was getting closer. Emily didn't want to spend another night in that house. But where would they go? She called her sister that night, told her half the story, just enough to ask if they could stay for a few days. Her sister laughed nervously, but agreed. "Let me know if your dog finds a buried treasure," she joked. But Emily didn't laugh. That night, something new happened. Max didn't just scratch the floor. He barked. Loud, deep, sharp. He stood over the spot like a soldier. His body was tense, his ears raised, teeth showing, not in aggression, but in warning. And Emma, she didn't cry. She stared, eyes wide. Then slowly, she reached one hand through the crib slats, toward the corner. Emily rushed over and scooped her up, heart pounding. She didn't sleep at all that night. The next morning, Tom made a decision. "I'm tearing up the floor," he said. Now. Max stood beside him as he grabbed his toolbox. The floorboard came up with a creak, exposing a dark, musty void beneath. Tom aimed his flashlight downward, and Emily leaned over his shoulder. Max froze. Then he backed up. Something was there, but not a mouse, not a pipe, not wiring. Something wrapped in old cloth. Emily covered her mouth. Tom reached down slowly, heart racing. As he pulled the bundle out, the smell of mildew filled the room. He unwrapped the cloth and froze. Inside was an old, rusted tin box, and inside that, layers of brittle paper, photos, letters, a journal. Emily picked it up with shaking hands. It wasn't theirs. It was written by a woman named Margaret, a former owner. The last entry dated back to 1961. "I lost her in this room," one line read. "The floor took her, and no one believed me, but she still cries at night. I hear her. I hear her." Emily looked at Tom. It's a baby." They flipped a photo. On the back, Margaret and Annabelle, 1961. Emma let out a giggle, and Max, he sat down, calm, quiet, for the first time in weeks. Emily's hands trembled. Something had been calling out through the floor. Max heard it. Emma felt it, but only when they listened, really listened, did the truth begin to surface. And they were about to find out that this was only the beginning. After the scratching became a nightly torment, and Emma's disturbed sleep patterns started affecting her health, Emily and Tom could no longer brush it off. They were tired, worried, and increasingly on edge. Even the warmth of Max's golden fur brushing against their legs no longer offered the same comfort. It only reminded them something was deeply wrong. Emily began keeping a notebook on her nightstand. She jotted down every detail of Max's behavior. What time he started scratching, how long he did it, whether Emma woke up, and whether she cried, stared, or laughed. It was a bizarre sort of science experiment. But when your child is waking up at 3:13 a.m. every single night, exactly when the dog begins pacing, you start clinging to patterns, to meaning. One night, she left her phone recording video in the nursery while they pretended to sleep. The next morning, Emily watched the footage with her coffee trembling in her hand. Max stood up from his usual spot as the clock struck 3:13 a.m. on the baby monitor. He walked to the exact same corner and began scratching furiously. But it wasn't the scratching that sent a chill down her spine. It was Emma. She wasn't startled awake by the noise. She was already awake, sitting up in her crib, not crying, not babbling, just staring, straight at the corner, eyes wide, fixed. It was like she had been waiting for something. Emily didn't show Tom the video immediately. She wanted to believe there was a logical explanation, a cold draft, or a sound only dogs and babies could hear. Maybe even gas lines under the floor, or electromagnetic interference. Something, anything. That wasn't whatever this felt like. She booked a pest control inspection, a full HVAC check, even had an electrician look at the wiring under the nursery floor. Nothing. No pests. No mold. No issues. Everything was perfect. Except it wasn't. Max had become a shadow of himself. He didn't eat much anymore. He barely wagged his tail. His eyes were red and tired, and he'd stopped playing. Even when Tom brought out his favorite old tennis ball, it was as if his entire purpose had narrowed to one thing: protect Emma from whatever was under that floor. One day, Emily found herself alone at home. Tom had taken Emma to his mother's house to give Emily a break, but she couldn't relax. She stood in the nursery, staring at the floorboards Max was obsessed with. They looked no different from any other part of the room, but she felt it, an energy, heavy, cold, uninviting. She knelt down and placed her hand on the wood. Nothing, just smooth, solid oak. But when she pressed her ear to the floor, she heard something, a thump, faint, but there. It wasn't the pipes. It wasn't the heater. It sounded deliberate. When Tom returned home later that evening, she was pale. She showed him the footage, told him what she heard. For once, he didn't laugh it off. "I think we need to open the floor," she whispered. He hesitated. What if it's nothing? And what if it's not? That night, they waited until Emma was asleep in the guest room. They moved Max to the backyard, though he fought them the whole way, and they returned to the nursery with tools and a flashlight. Tom pried open the floorboard, the one Max always scratched. Beneath it, a faint draft tickled their skin. Emily held the flashlight and gasped. There was a gap beneath the foundation, about 3 feet wide, almost like a crawl space, and something glinted in the light. They looked at each other. Tom reached down carefully, pulling out a small, rusted tin box. It was old, locked but fragile. Tom forced it open with a flathead screwdriver, and inside were items no one expected to find. A photo, yellowed and folded, of a woman holding a baby, a small, dusty rattle, a leather-bound journal, tied with twine. Emily untied it with trembling fingers. The first page read, "If anyone ever finds this, please believe me. My baby was in danger, and no one would listen." They read in silence for nearly an hour. The entries were dated 1971. The woman's name was Marlene Collins. She and her husband had lived in this house when it was newly built. Her journal started off like any new mother's, overwhelmed but full of love. Then gradually, the tone darkened. "The baby wakes every night at 3:13, just staring, always to the same corner. I thought it was my imagination. Then I saw the shadow. It's there. I know it is. David says I need sleep. He doesn't see it, but it's there, watching. The dog won't go near her anymore, just growls at the floor. Every night, she screamed tonight, and I did too. I saw it move. Please, if anyone finds this, don't leave your baby in this room. Don't ignore the signs." The last page was smeared with what looked like water stains, or tears. Tom sat back in silence. Emily clutched the journal to her chest. They didn't sleep that night, and Emily didn't sleep the next night either. Even with Emma safely in the guest room, even with the nursery door shut and latched, her nerves wouldn't calm. Max had stopped scratching, but not because he'd lost interest. He was silent now, yes, but it was the kind of silence that holds its breath. He lay at the end of the hallway, head pressed against the floor, staring at the nursery door, not sleeping, just waiting. Something had changed. That night, around 2:37 a.m., Emily heard it again. The floor creaked, but not from their footsteps or Max's paws. It was something below, something deliberate, like a tap, then a scrape, then silence. She froze in the doorway of her bedroom, unsure if she imagined it. Tom was still asleep, but Max had already gotten up, tail stiff, ears forward, that same quiet growl rumbling from deep in his throat. By morning, Emily had made up her mind. She needed to know what was under that floor. Tom, still trying to rationalize everything, suggested they check the original property documents. "Maybe there's a crawl space or something," he offered, half yawning, clearly not buying into the anxiety gripping Emily. But when he opened the old deed records and house plans, kept in a dusty folder tucked inside the kitchen drawer, they found something strange. The current layout of the house showed no basement, no crawl space, but the original plans, there was a crawl space right underneath what was now Emma's nursery, a small square access hatch, hidden under the original wooden flooring, exactly where Max had been scratching. They decided to investigate. Emily didn't want to wait any longer. Tom pried up one of the older floorboards near the corner, the exact spot Max always fixated on. Beneath the board, covered in dust and bits of insulation, was a rusted metal latch. It took a screwdriver and more effort than expected to lift it, and then a deep, stale cold rushed out. Not the kind of chill from air conditioning or poor insulation. This was old air, forgotten air, the air of something sealed for decades. They shone a flashlight down, wooden steps, steep and narrow, led into the dark. Max growled again, not in fear, but in warning, and that's when Emily whispered, "I need to know. I need to know what's down there." As they descended, they noticed how the crawl space wasn't just for storage. The walls were lined with scraps of cloth, worn toys, and torn wallpaper. A child's drawing, still barely taped to a support beam. It was faded, but in crayon. Someone had written Marlene. Tom stopped cold. "Marlene," he muttered. "Didn't that name come up when we got the inspection report?" The house was previously owned by a woman named Marlene Eckhart, I think. But Marlene never sold the house. She was listed as deceased, presumed missing. From that moment, Emily couldn't shake the feeling that Max had been trying to protect Emma from something old, something buried, something unspoken. She went down to the town archives, dug up what little she could about Marlene. The neighbors remembered her. Quiet woman, never married, took care of her disabled younger brother after their parents died in a fire. People said she became different after that, distrustful, paranoid. One neighbor, now in her 80s, recalled something chilling. That poor girl locked herself away with her brother for months, said she heard voices in the walls, scratching, crying. The brother eventually passed. No one ever saw Marlene again after that, and now, decades later, the scratching had returned, and Max, he had known it wasn't just old wood creaking under pressure. He knew something Emma couldn't say, couldn't understand, but whatever it was, it had her attention, because now, Emma had started pointing to that corner during the day, sometimes babbling, other times going still and silent, eyes wide. Once, Emily found her holding a single crayon she didn't recognize, a red one, and on the inside wall of her crib, just faintly, was a scribble, a child's handwriting, just one word, "Hi." Emily didn't show Tom the crayon message right away, not because she didn't trust him, but because something about it made her feel watched, as if sharing it out loud would somehow wake something up. That night, she kept Emma close, sleeping with the baby monitor volume turned up, and Max curled tightly at the foot of the bed. He didn't scratch. He didn't move. He just watched the door, wide awake. By morning, she'd convinced herself it was nothing. Stress, lack of sleep, a weird stain from an old toy. She cleaned the crib slats and said nothing, but Max didn't let it go. The scratching returned the next night, this time even earlier, even louder. Emily sat outside the nursery, her heart sinking as she heard the thump of paws against wood and the scrape of nails against floorboards. She turned to Tom. "We need to open it." "Open what?" he asked, barely awake. "That corner, the one he keeps scratching." Tom sighed. "Em, come on. There's nothing under the floor. The house is only 8 years old. New build. No crawl space, no rodents, no ghosts." She didn't smile at his attempt to joke. "I'm serious," she said quietly. "He knows something's there." Tom agreed, if only to put the issue to rest. The next day, he brought up a flashlight and a crowbar. He started gently, prying up the corner board Max was obsessed with. The golden retriever was antsy the whole time, pacing behind them, tail down, ears flicking like he could already sense something shifting. The first few boards came up easily. Clean wood, no mold, no smell, nothing odd. But underneath, there was an access panel neither of them knew existed. A square, maybe 2 feet across. It blended almost perfectly into the subfloor. Too perfect. Tom looked up at Emily. "This isn't on the house plan." She knelt beside him, fingers trembling. "Open it." He pried it up slowly. Beneath was a shallow crawl space, but not a normal one. This wasn't for pipes or insulation. It was too clean, too purposeful. The walls weren't lined with fiberglass, just cold, flat cement. No cobwebs, no dust, like it had been opened recently. Emily shivered. Max was whimpering now, low in his throat, tail tucked between his legs. Tom lowered the flashlight inside and froze. "What?" Emily whispered, peering over. At first, it looked like nothing, just empty concrete. But in the far right corner, something caught the light. A small cloth doll, old faded. Its threadbare dress had once been pink. One eye missing. It sat propped up perfectly, like someone had deliberately placed it there. Tom reached in and pulled it out. It was cold, damp but not wet, and it smelled faintly of lavender. Emily stepped back. "That's not Emma's. That's not hers." They looked at each other. "Let's go downstairs," Tom said quickly, the tension in his voice real for the first time. They placed the doll on the kitchen counter, and stared at it like it might move. Max stayed close to Emma's side the entire time. "I don't get it," Tom muttered. "Why was it down there? And why is Max so obsessed with it?" Emily didn't respond. She was flipping through a binder, an old real estate file the previous owners had left behind. There, a name, Marlene Taylor, previous owner, moved out suddenly. No forwarding address. That night, after Emma went to bed, Emily sat at her laptop and typed the name into Google. At first, nothing, but then a local news archive, a neighborhood blog, a small article from 6 years ago. Toddler found dead in local home. Family moved out days later. Her blood ran cold. The address matched theirs. She clicked the article. 2-year-old girl passed away unexpectedly in her sleep. Authorities say no foul play suspected. Parents describe behavior changes in their dog days before. The child, identified as Lily Taylor, had no known health issues. The family moved out shortly after. Emily stared at the screen. Max sat beside her, eyes glued to the stairs. She whispered, "It was her doll. That was Lily's doll." And in that moment, every whimper, every paw scratch, every stare Max had thrown at that spot made a terrifying kind of sense. He wasn't trying to dig. He was trying to warn them. It was just past midnight when Max began to bark. Not his usual low grumble, but sharp, frantic, panic barks that echoed through the quiet house like sirens. The sound jolted Emily out of bed before she was even fully awake. She grabbed the baby monitor and saw that Emma was crying again. But this time, something was different. The monitor feed was glitching. Not just static or signal loss, but flickering, like the camera was trying to adjust to something unseen. Shadows moved across the frame, unnatural and jerky. Emma lay in her crib, wailing, her tiny arms reaching upward, not toward the ceiling, but toward the far right corner. That corner. Emily grabbed Tom's arm. "Something's wrong." Max was already at the nursery door, barking like he was ready to tear it off its hinges. The moment they opened it, he bolted inside and lunged at the far wall, growling, teeth bared, the fur along his spine raised like a saw blade. Emma was shaking in her crib, tears, hiccups, tiny gasps, and in that corner, something changed. The air felt thick, charged. A sudden cold swept through the room, like a breath held too long. Tom stopped in his tracks. Emily rushed to Emma, scooping her up, cradling her tightly. Then the light bulb above them flickered and exploded. Glass rained down in soft, glittering shards. Tom swore, ducking to shield his face, and in the brief moment of total darkness, they heard it, a whisper, faint, like it came from beneath the floor. "Mommy." Emily clutched Emma tighter, heart thundering. She turned to Tom, who looked pale, stunned. Max had stopped barking. He now sat in front of the corner, his body rigid, his tail still, just staring. Then came another whisper, louder this time, "Help me." Tom ran to the corner, crouching down. "Emily, we have to open it again. It's not just a crawl space." Emily hesitated. "We should leave. Call someone." "No," Tom said, voice trembling but firm. "We need to know. For Emma." This time, Max didn't need prompting. He began scratching at the boards again, but not randomly, purposefully, like he knew exactly where to go. Tom followed, pried open the loose floorboard they had covered days before, and lifted the panel again. Only this time, the crawlspace looked deeper, impossible, but true. Where once there was shallow concrete floor, there was now an opening, a tunnel, rough, dirt walls leading into pitch-black darkness. Emily gasped. That wasn't there. Tom reached for his flashlight. "I'm going down." "Tom, no. I need to see." He lowered himself into the tunnel, flashlight cutting a narrow beam into the dark. Max tried to follow, but Emily called him back. She held Emma tight, her eyes never leaving that hole in the floor. The air down there was colder and damp. Tom moved slowly, crawling on his hands and knees. The tunnel curved slightly, just enough to swallow the light. The further he went, the more unnatural it felt, like the tunnel itself had been carved, not by construction, but by something else. Then he saw it, a small wooden box, like a time-worn toy chest, covered in dirt. He pulled it closer, brushed the surface. It wasn't locked. Inside were children's toys, rattles, blocks, a small stuffed bear, and beneath them, a bundle of old, stained newspaper clippings. Tom squinted at the headlines. Local babysitter found dead in woods. Missing girl's body never recovered. Police close cold case in Taylor home incident. And one final photo, faded, scratched, but unmistakable. Marlene, not just the previous homeowner, the babysitter. Emily's voice echoed down the tunnel. "Tom, what is it?" But Tom was staring at the final clipping now. Marlene hadn't just been the one who owned the home. She was the last one to see Lily alive. and she had lived alone until neighbors started complaining about strange smells, odd noises, and finally called the authorities. By the time they searched the house, Marlene was gone, vanished. Emily gasped above as another whisper came, this time not from the floor, but from behind her. Where's Lily? Emily spun around. No one there, just the empty corner, and Max now growling again, his hackles raised, his gaze fixed on something Emily couldn't see. Suddenly, the nursery window slammed shut on its own. Emma screamed. Emily grabbed her and bolted from the room, calling down to Tom. We're leaving now. Tom emerged from the tunnel, dirt on his face, chest heaving. I found it. I found everything. They left the house that night, with only Max by their side, and the knowledge that something, not someone, had been buried beneath their home, watching, waiting, not for them, but for a little girl, one who had never left. The Johnsons never returned to that house. Within a week, the property was on the market, though they never disclosed what really happened. How could they? Who would believe them? That a dog sensed what no human ever could, that something, or someone, had been hiding beneath their baby's room, whispering from the shadows. Tom turned over everything he found to the police, the box, the clippings, the tunnel. An investigation was reopened. Cadaver dogs were brought in. Forensics teams surveyed the crawlspace and surrounding property. Days later, news broke across local TV stations. Remains found beneath suburban home confirmed to be missing girl from 1988. Lily, her name was spoken again for the first time in decades. And Marlene, she was never found. No death certificate, no confirmed sightings. But now, her face was on every news segment, with renewed calls for information. Someone somewhere knew what happened to her, or maybe she had never truly left. Emily watched it all from the comfort of their temporary rental home. She sat on the couch, Emma safe in her arms, Max at her feet, finally calm, finally resting. But sometimes, late at night, Emma would still stare into corners. Sometimes she'd smile. Once she even waved. Who are you waving to, sweetheart? Emily whispered softly. Emma didn't speak yet, but she giggled and said a word that chilled Emily to her bones. Lily. She looked at Max, who raised his head, but didn't bark. Just looked, quiet, watching, like he always had. Maybe he saw things they couldn't. Maybe he always had. Maybe he always would. If this story moved you, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe to Paws and Claws for more powerful, real-life stories of the animals who protect, love, and even save us in the most unbelievable ways. Max isn't just a dog. He's a reminder that sometimes the most loyal souls are the ones who speak no words, but see the truth we ignore. Hit the bell so you never miss a story that might just change how you see your pet and your home forever.